So the background is that way back in 2011, I was watching, as some of you may have, a three-part series called Mix Britannia. And I hadn't known at the time, but a lot of the research for that was done by Shamian and Peter Aspinall. I was involved in the first one, but not in the second. The second one opens with the presenter actually George Alagiah, going off to meet his brother-in-law, who happened to be one of these mixed-race GI babies. And later on in the program, another one of these, Brian Lawrenson, also appears. And I thought this was so interesting. I thought I knew quite a lot about the Second World War, but I didn't know anything about these children. And at the time I was working on something else, but I thought, you know, once I've got that out the way, I'm going to go back and see who's working on this. And if nobody is working on it, I would like to go further. So in 2013, I went back to this topic and found that very, very little had been done. So I managed to contact Tony Martin, who was the brother-in-law of George Alagiah, and Brian Lawrenson, who I believe is here today, which is great. And, you know, they put me in contact with people, and then various other contacts, and I was on the radio, and more people contacted me and said, I'm one of these people, I want to tell you my story. And what was extraordinary, you felt that so many of these people growing up in a time, I mean, this is pre-Windrush, okay, when, you know, before the Second World War, Britain didn't have, it had a black population, a mixed race population, but it wasn't very big, and it tended to be concentrated in certain ports. And these people were growing up in often very white areas where the GIs had been located, so sort of East Anglia, South Coast, Southwest, a few in the Midlands, a few in the North. And they have often felt very isolated. They've got no role models. So many had been put in children's homes, and they had really kind of lacked a sense of belonging and problems about identity and whatever. And many of them hadn't told anybody their stories, you know, about their early life. And so here I was, a kind of stranger coming along, but a very interested stranger, and people told me all sorts of things, and it was amazing. So I put together this book called Britain's Brown Babies. Now you may think, what is this awful term, brown babies? But just to clarify, at the time when these children were born, during the Second World War, the African-American press in the States got very interested in these children and wanted them to come out to the States, which actually was generally blocked by the British government. But they coined this term, they call them the brown babies. And it was the term also used after the war for German children born in the period when there was the occupation of Germany by the Americans, etc. So as mixed race children, this term brown babies. And some of the so-called brown babies have now adopted the term for themselves. So anyway, so the book is called Britain's Brown Babies, in inverted commas. And I just, you know, learned a lot from this book, and I wanted it to go further. I mean, you know, a book doesn't necessarily get very wide distribution. So I put together an exhibition with a friend of mine who's a graphic designer, a physical exhibition, and it was not that big. It was 7 6-foot pull-up banners, you know, and we first had it at the end of last year, well, in November, in the Black Cultural Archives, and then it went to a library in Edgware in London, then it went to Manchester Central Library, and it was going to go on tour. It's going to go to Bristol, possibly to Liverpool, it's going to go to Cambridge, it's going to go to Suffolk, etc. But of course we had lockdown, and then I got talking to Shamian, and I said, well, you know, it would just be fantastic if it could have a kind of permanent home and get to a wide public. So I'm really, really delighted that Shamian agreed to this, and it's been really fantastic working with Shamian. And what's been good is not only has this allowed me to tell the stories in my book and use more of the photos, because people sent me so many photographs. I was only allowed a limited number in the books. I mean, it's got over 50 in the book, but, you know, I had literally hundreds. But after the book came out, a lot of other people have contacted me. So there are 9 extra people in the book with their photographs. And, you know, I mean, I think there are many, many more out there. I mean, the estimate is that there were 2,000 born mixed race GI. I think it actually could be more. I mean, I don't know, because, you know, who knows, but there really were a lot. And I also had a chapter at the end of my book about the children born to black GIs in the 50s. I mean, they approached me and I thought, well, this is really interesting. Actually, this is about the war. But in fact, it would be interesting to see how different their stories are, if different at all. You know, is it now less racist? Can their parents now marry? Because during the war, the GIs, the black GIs, weren't able to marry their white girlfriends. It was held by the American military that you had to get permission. All GIs got permission from their commanding officer, and they refused it for the black GIs. And the rationale given was, well, back in the States, there were then 48 states, 30 had laws that forbade marriage between whites and blacks. And they said, well, back there you wouldn't be able to. So these children were born illegitimate. They were born without fathers. They were, you know, nearly half of the ones I've talked to were put in homes. So they had a very difficult upbringing. So it's been a great honor to hear their stories and tell their stories. And I think, you know, many of them felt it was quite a cathartic thing being able to tell their stories and then meet each other. So quite a few met each other at the book launch, but they've also now have a private Facebook group called Britain's Brown Babies. They gave it the name. Arlene, who I believe is here, may say something about that. So, you know, I now think at last, you know, there's a way in which they can feel they've got a sense of community and belonging.